Welcome, everybody, to how to navigate the remote and flexible job market. We would like to welcome you back if you've been here before. And of course, if it's your first webinar with us at FlexJobs, thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone just a second or two to get settled. While you do that, we really enjoy seeing where people are joining in from. So if you want to get used to using the chat section, feel free to type in where you are joining from. And while you're doing that, I want to cover a couple of items to make sure we get through the webinar smoothly. So number one, don't worry about taking notes unless you really want to, because we are recording this presentation, and we will send out a link to the video as well as the resources that we share throughout the presentation. You will get this within a week. It will be sent to the email address you used to register for the webinar today. Please note that this presentation portion has been pre-recorded, but after the presentation, we do have a Q&A that is live with one of the members of the coaching team. For those questions that you would like to have answered, please go ahead and put those questions into the Q&A section of Big Marker rather than the chat section. This really helps us keep track of, prioritize all of the questions because they'll all be in one place. We can answer as many questions as possible. We always do that, but if you upvote or give a thumbs up to a question that somebody else poses that you would also like answered, that gives us the opportunity to prioritize some of those questions as well. And since we probably can't get to all of those, that's why it's really nice to have them all in one spot too. We guarantee that you'll learn something, and we do our best to make sure we provide you as much information as possible, not only in this presentation, but during the Q&A. So that being said, let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about today. I always like to do that first. We are going to talk about new updated trends in remote work and flexible jobs. I want to share with everybody the top career fields and the companies in the remote and flexible job market. I know since you're here today, that is important to you. We will briefly talk about job scams, work from home scams. I think it's important to bring that up as we've seen an influx in job scams over the last couple of years. And then finally, we'll talk about how you can execute parts of your remote job search through your resume and job applications for when applying to remote jobs. And as I mentioned, of course, we will have an audience Q&A at the end. All right, so let's get started and talk about the trends that we're seeing in the remote job market. So a flexible job, I want to make sure that we are really on the same page before we go into that information. Some of the terms that we're going to be using today, I think it's important for us to talk about them. A flexible job is really a catch-all phrase that means anytime a job that allows for some level of flexibility outside of the 9-to-5 traditional in-office role. Excuse me. So the flexibility can be in terms of scheduling, can be in terms of job location, the status, meaning is it an employee role, a freelance role, or a temporary project role, and also flexibility in hours. So a flexible job will have quote unquote flexibility in at least one of those categories to be considered a flexible job. On a side note, side hustles are typically part-time, but they can also be freelance or employee roles. They can also be remote or on-site. So those jobs are included as well. Before going forward, I want you to think about what your ideal flexible job would look like. It's a little bit different for everybody. You might have multiple ideas of what you'd like. You might want something that is remote and full-time, or maybe you want a part-time job that is in the office, but your flexibility that you want is part-time. Or that the job that you are looking for does have a flexible schedule and allows for remote work, for example, which is the category that I fall into. when I was first looking for remote jobs. That was what was really important to me. It's important for you to know what you would like as your ideal, because it really will help you and your job search take shape when you focus on the ideal flex. And then you can concentrate your job search focus on that ideal flexibility piece of the pie there. So now, as promised, current trends. The last 3 years now, as we can look back, have changed the course of remote work really for the long term. And that's what we're seeing. What's changed is how we conduct our work on a daily basis. However, in the midst of everything that is happening, the good news is that remote opportunities are steadily rising and have been steadily rising. We're continuing to see increases in both remote and hybrid job postings. So on that previous screen where we talked about your ideal flex, and I mentioned part-time and in office, or in office some of the time and remote some of the time, that's hybrid. Hybrid is a combination of a remote option and an in-office option. And we are seeing hybrid job postings grow as well. Here's what we're seeing. We saw a 52% increase in hybrid job listings on the FlexJobs site in 2022 in comparison to 2021. We also saw a 20% increase in remote job listings on FlexJobs last year versus 2021, which was a continued increase from the previous year. So we are continuing to see more remote and hybrid opportunities on the job site, on FlexJobs, on the jobs that we are posting. Before and after the pandemic, just to give a little bit of context, in 2019, there were 4.9% of U.S. employees worked from home full-time, and that's a census survey. So just 4.9%. As of June of 2022, a whopping 80%, 8 out of 10 U.S. employees work from home, either in a hybrid capacity or a completely remote model. So about 80% of us who work have some option of remote work available to us. Now, the future prediction, it's going to level out a little bit, that 28% of U.S. employees will work from home fully within 5 years. That's from 2021. So in a couple of years, we feel like that's where it's going to be. But right now, 5 in 10 people are working as a hybrid option. 3 in 10 are exclusively working remotely, and that's where you get the 80%. And there are 2 in 10 people who work entirely on site. All right. One other thing that we have noted, we have seen a significant increase in people searching for remote jobs as well. The remote opportunities are growing, and so is the competition. Remote and hybrid jobs are attracting 7 times more applicants than in-person roles. However, if you are coming to events like this, pursuing training and coaching and learning how to search and present yourself well, you are positioning yourself ahead of those who are not doing the same thing. So if I asked you earlier to raise your hand for your preferred type of flexible work, it's a safe bet that most of your hands would shoot up for remote work, some combination of remote work. Maybe it's part-time remote work, a full-time job with remote work. But what we know is that 80% of professionals say that remote work is their most desired type of work flexibility, ahead of flexible schedules. It's ahead of working part-time, and it's ahead of being a freelancer. So because of that, we really wanted to show you the most common remote job titles and remote job categories or remote job fields. So over the next couple of slides, we'll be talking about that. And our goal in showing you these lists is really to get you thinking about your individual possibilities. So hopefully, as you're looking at these fast growing and common remote career fields and jobs, you are starting to see or have some light bulbs go off in your mind about what possibilities there are for you in your flexible and remote job search over the coming year. So top remote fields over the last year, we saw computer and IT, marketing, accounting and finance, project management, medical and health, HR and recruiting, and customer service. Now, the fastest growing fields, some of these are the same, but we see accounting and finance, of course, HR, recruiting, marketing, project management, communications, and legal. We saw some growth in those areas as well. And nonprofit. I do want to point that out because that's sometimes a category that we don't mention a lot, but we did see steady growth in nonprofit remote job postings last year. All right. I wanted to share too the top remote job titles that we saw on FlexJobs this year. Some of them fall into those categories that we just saw: accountant, executive assistant, customer service representative, recruiter, technical writer, graphic designer, customer success manager, kind of rounded out. So these are some remote job titles that have many postings that you'll find when you are perusing for remote jobs. And in addition to the wide variety of jobs and career fields associated with those flexible and remote jobs, there are so many companies, both large and small, that offer flexible, remote, and hybrid work options. On the slide, you'll see some of the top companies that offer these jobs. As you can see, as you're reading through some of the list, they come from a variety of industries such as communications, healthcare, tech, and education, and that's just a few of them. Some of these companies you may have heard of and have pretty good, are pretty familiar to most of us, and some might be new to you. But as you're going through your job search, sometimes focusing on and targeting a company that you know has the type of work-life balance or the type of remote work policy that you're looking for is a really great place to start or to include in your job search. So you can find other companies that support flexible work options by visiting the jobs and companies section of our FlexJobs blog, or by going to the guide to the best companies with flexible jobs, which has over 57,000 researched and vetted flexible companies available for your research throughout your job search. Well, how do you find those companies? Once we give you those resources, how can you find the companies and the jobs? First things first, location matters. And this is really important to understand. From the start, your location matters in a remote and flexible job search. A lot of people, including myself, assumed that if you are working from home or remotely, your location doesn't matter when getting hired or when applying to a job that is also 100% remote. However, almost all, 95% of remote job listings actually do have some kind of location requirement. And in fact, only 5% of fully remote jobs are work from anywhere. Now, why is this? So there are several reasons which you can see on the slide. Employment laws, regulations, and taxes vary if you're in the United States or in a different country. They vary between countries, they vary between states, and employers have to make sure that they are abiding by the laws and regulations that are set out by the state, city, state, and country. Really, companies might want you to be near an airport, very easily able to travel to corporate or attend trainings. They might want you to be in a certain time zone so that you can handle clients and meetings and travel for those particular things. And so there's a lot of different reasons for having a location. Another important location is if you are in a role or a job that requires a license. Different states and countries, of course, have different licensing requirements. And so those are some of the reasons that it's important when you are searching for a remote job that you use your location as part of your search so that the searching can filter out any opportunities that might not be available to you based on where you live. Okay, so finding flexible companies. I already mentioned the company site on FlexJobs, but we have a way for you to find those companies who are discussing their flexible work options more and more as we, get further away from the pandemic, but as those work changes have happened. You can find these on lists like FlexJobs Company Guide and the top 100 companies with the most remote job listings. But you can also go directly to companies' career pages. So not all companies will make their career or their flexible work options clear in the job descriptions, but they will often discuss things like work-life balance and flexibility on the career page of the company website. Also, think about looking at their social media pages, any public relations that pop out for the company when you do a Google search. You can also look for flexible companies by thinking about the companies that you visited and, given your services to and had contact with, products and services that you love, vendors that you've worked with previously. And if remote work is on your list of the ideal flexibility that you are looking for, you are opening your options up to include all sorts of companies that are outside of your geographic area. If you've already had some kind of experience with the company, if you've been a customer of theirs, a vendor, or a business partner, it gives you something additional to talk about in your cover letter or when you're reaching out, or even when you are interviewing, you can kind of relate to the product. And finally, I do want to mention, don't forget about your alumni associations that you frequented before or are a part of. Kind of lean into those because many alma maters have the alumni section. They may have insights to share about their own workplaces. They might even have their own job board for alumni of a certain university. And then you might be able to find some additional flexible and remote work options that way. For flexible job listings and how to locate those, of course, FlexJobs is a place that we recommend starting for pre-screened flexible jobs. And as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're of course going to talk about job scams, but with FlexJobs, or you should know, or I'll share right now, that all of the jobs on the FlexJobs site are pre-screened. We know they are legitimate opportunities and they are not scams. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So FlexJobs is a great place to go. Smaller specialty job search sites, that's a little bit of a mouthful, but like Skill Crush's list of the 25 best sites for finding remote work is a good place to go to. Proven has a list of 100 top job boards, and that's organized by industry. Ryan Robinson also has a good list of freelance job opportunities. So those are some areas that you can look for some niche job board sites to help you find a remote, flexible, or freelance opportunity. Along the same lines of your alumni association, look at other industry and professional association in your field of choice. You might already belong to some of those, or you could join some to have more access to those job areas, because they typically do have job boards as well, and they do offer networking opportunities, which is a really big, important component to the job search as well. Along the networking lines, don't be quiet about your job search. Think about your friends, family, neighbors, where you get your hair done, your dentist, any of those folks, and your professional network. How did they find, their last job? What sources were helpful for them? If those folks in your network are working flexibly or remotely, kind of talk about how that happened. And now that we've moved beyond 2020, how have things sort of settled out in your remote environment, and what type of work are you doing and how are you doing it? Because we know that more people are working flexibly than ever before, particularly before 2020. So it's likely that people who are working the way that you want to work. So when talking to your friends, it's not always just about asking them what they do, but how do they do it? How do they shape their day? Do they have a flexible schedule, and how does that work? Do they do a side hustle? Is it freelance? The more questions you can ask, the more ways you can expand the knowledge you have. You will gain more and experience more progress and momentum in your job search as you network and ask these important questions. Okay. So we're all going through finding companies and finding jobs. When you actually are looking for these remote jobs, there are some keywords and terms that you should pay attention to, and phrases that will help you yield better results than others. Interestingly, maybe not surprisingly, phrases like work from home and work at home were used mostly by job scammers offering fake remote jobs. This is what we saw historically. So at FlexJobs, we recommended people steer clear of those phrases. However, since the pandemic, we've seen a big increase in legitimate companies using phrases like work from home and work at home. So we still recommend that you use caution with those phrases, as scammers are still using those same phrases, but it is important to know, and I think we have to point out that it doesn't necessarily mean it is a sure signal that the job listing is, in fact, a scam. It might be, but it might not be. So that's something that would require additional research. Employers also use phrases to describe their remote jobs that might be like location agnostic or digital nomad, but we've found that phrases like telecommute, virtual, and remote are the most common. So it's a good idea to stick to those phrases when you are searching for your job on those online searches. We recommend strongly that you look for remote search filters on any job search websites so that you can target remote jobs. Some job search websites also have a hybrid option as well. So make sure you look for those filters and use the filters that meet the work flexibility that you want the most. And then you can expand your search terms to things beyond job titles, including hard skills like maybe Salesforce, computer programming programs, or soft skills that you want to use in your next job. Maybe it's public speaking, time management, organization. Those types of things can help you also have a more laser focused job search as well. I gave you a sneak peek on how to avoid job scams, or at least one area that you should consider, or one key phrase to consider. But truly, scams are an unfortunate but real part of the flexible job search, which is, highly unfortunate. But especially for these work from home or remote jobs that we're looking for, it is a way that bad actors can take advantage of folks. So these are some of the main warning signs that we want to point out. Things like no company name, or a generic email like Tony Frana at earthlink.net or yahoo.com or something along those lines. Any legitimate company should have something like at GE or at apple.com after the @ sign in an email address. If you are being reached out to for a job that you have been offered or offered an interview to, and there is a vague or actually no job description at all, that is a warning sign. Anytime a potential employer asks for money or personal info before you are hired, well, first of all, should never ask for money. The personal information you fill out on the job application, of course, but your forms where you fill out your banking, your direct deposit information doesn't come until after you are hired. That is definitely a red flag. If they are only willing to communicate with you through instant messenger and IM interviews, that is also a warning sign. I do want to caveat this too, as we found that through the pandemic, there have been more companies who are doing some pre-screening through some technology like WhatsApp or IM interviews as a pre-screening tool. So that may not mean it's a scam right away. But it definitely requires some more looking into. It also requires you to know that you should talk live with somebody before you sign your offer or accept your offer for the particular job. We've seen a lot of scams pop up with apps like, I think it's Telegram, it's called, where a company will ask you to download an app for an interview. And that's, something that information can become encrypted and the people can use that information to do whatever they want and they ask for personal information. So that's definitely a red flag you want to be careful on. If you get an immediate job offer and there's an urgency that you need to accept right away or the job will go away, pay attention to the web address in the URL line on each job posting. Sometimes a fake site is very similar. It will look identical, but there will be a slight change in the URL. And again, each one of these signs by itself is a signal to you that you need to do some more research. The more signs there are for a particular job, the more likely it is a scam. And the bottom line is this: trust your gut. People who have been scammed almost always say there was a point in the process where they thought something was off, something didn't feel right, the employer was acting strangely, but they kept going because they wanted to get a job. So trust your instinct to stay safe. That's really important to lean into. And on this slide right now, we're going to talk about how you can take some of those red flags and try to iron out whether or not the job is a scam. And there are two easy ways that you can do more research on a job, at least to get your search started, if you think some might be a scam. So number one, open a new browser and do a keyword search for the company name. So whether it's, Apple, GE, whatever the company's name is. So type in the company's name and the word scam and then hit enter. And this could uncover local news reports, BBB complaints, FBI warnings, and any other evidence of scamming. So that's one of the first things that you can do, and it doesn't take hardly any time. The second method is for you, if you think you found a copycat company website or scam, do a search for the company's name and the keyword careers, so Apple careers or GE careers, to find the real career website and compare the web address that you found with the job posting to the one you are concerned about. So if they're not the same, then you've likely found a scam site. You can let the company know. Also, there's been instances over the last year or so where I've been working with a client on jobs that they would like to apply for, working on their resume reviews. And when you go to the company page, sometimes you will see if a company has been a victim of scammers, a little message that says, we will never ask for this type of information. You will be contacted by such and such. And so there are companies that will alert you to that too at times. So you might see that as you go through your job search. So once you found some companies and jobs of interest, it really is important to position yourself in the best light on your flexible job applications. So let's go ahead and talk about how to do that. First and foremost, the first thing you want to do is think about the skills you already have that make you a great flexible or remote worker. Now, when we survey employers, they say that the following skills are really important for flexible professionals to demonstrate. Written and verbal communication skills, time and task management with the ability to focus. Obviously, you're not going to be in an office where you have somebody checking in with you and checking on you throughout the day. So you have to be able to get your work done. You want to make sure that you show that you are proactive and you ask questions, because communication is so key in remote work. And if you don't quite understand something that is required of you or something that is done at the company, it's on you to be proactive to find out that information. We'll talk about technology a little bit more in a few minutes, but being comfortable with technology and troubleshooting when there are issues is really important, because if you're meeting with clients and you're using Zoom or some other form of technology, what happens or how do you troubleshoot when there is an issue? It's not if there's an issue, it's when, because we all know that happens. Do you have a growth mindset and embrace change? Are you open to learning? And again, I mentioned technology or digital communication tools. So the good news is, when it comes to digital communication skills or tools, is that these are the skills that you can very easily build. And there are a lot of resources out there to do that. On the slide, you'll see the most common programs and tools used by flexible and remote teams. Each of these does offer, to our knowledge, a free version or a free trial. So picking one or two from each group to learn is a good idea. Or even better, if you've started looking at job postings for the jobs that you are interested in, keeping a tally of the digital communication tools that are listed in the job postings and prioritizing that way. So if you look at 5 postings and 5 of them say Slack and Google Drive, and none of them say OneDrive or Dropbox, or only one does, I would start with Slack and Google Drive to prioritize learning. Then what you can do is utilize the free trials. You can enlist the help of your family or friends, your network, so you'll have somebody to communicate with and practice these tools with. Usually there are great tutorials for these on YouTube as well for most of these programs. So that is another resource that you can take advantage of pretty easily as well. Okay, so now how do you put your remote and flexible experience and skills on your resume? This is something, your resume that should be updated specifically when applying to flexible or remote jobs and updated every time you apply to a job. So the first question you want to ask yourself is whether or not you have any previous flexible work experience or not. The majority of us may, because of the last couple of years and having, maybe been forced into a remote work environment, but some of us might not. But you may have more than you think. So previous work experience or previous flexible work experience includes working from home, whether it's occasionally or all the time, having a flexible schedule. You might work part-time, you might freelance, but it can also be experiences working in an office if there is another office in a different time zone, or if you already use digital collaboration tools like Slack with your in-office team. That is flexible and remote work experience that you could highlight. It doesn't have to be a formalized situation, so even casual, flexible work does count. So ask yourself this question. For any potential experience, would you be able to talk about how you were productive and effective in that flexible work period or that flexible work arrangement? And if the answer is yes, then it definitely counts as something that you want to highlight. Now, if you truly don't have any flexible experience, that's okay. It's time to talk about the great skills you have to be a productive and effective flexible worker. So you're going to show your flexible work skills and tout your technology know-how. So when you are looking at your job titles on your resume, and if you have remote or hybrid or partial remote experience, these are the ways that you can show that experience. You can see in the red or orange colored boxes where it says fully remote work, and 20% remote work. We show different places on your resume where you can put the level of remote work that you are doing. But the idea here is with the job titles and the company that you worked, you include the remote work arrangement that you had. Every resume should have a summary of qualifications. Sometimes it's called a profile summary at the top of the document. The samples here are those sections, and you should and can see the specific flex-friendly skills and experiences underlined in red. This section of your resume can and should be updated every time you apply for a job based on the keywords and critical skills listed in the job description. So you can see positive, articulate, written and verbal communication skills in situations requiring accurate communication with management, project managers, and local or remote teams. You can see in the second example, a couple of underlines, 6 years experience working remotely and in flexible office environments. And finally, at the bottom, skilled at team collaboration while working independently in remote environments. So those are some ways that you can highlight those remote friendly skills that we know employers are looking for. Another section that you want to make sure that you have on your resume, especially for remote and flexible work, is a technology skills section. This is a great way to show employers that you are comfortable with technology, to highlight the specific technologies you know and are familiar with. So as you learn more of these remote and digital collaboration programs that we talked about earlier, you can add them to this section. So a couple things I like to point out. Underlined, of course, we have tools used for effective remote work at the bottom, video conferencing with the specific video conferencing tools, Skype, Join Me, IM, Slack, Google Chat, and new tools adopted on a regular basis. I really like this line. It's the fourth bullet on the top technology section, adapts quickly to new and changing technology. If you remember, embracing change and learning and a growth mindset was something important to remote employers, and this is a way to show that on your resume. And also just simply saying remote communication tools, email, phone, video conferencing, and again, being specific on the tools that you already know. And again, as you learn some of these tools and take advantage of some of those free trials, you can add to your technology skills section as well. All right, so a couple things that we want to talk about before we get into our question section are, what are the things that you can do next to start executing your job search for remote and flexible work? Number one, research your career field to find out and to get a good handle on what's out there. Make sure you know and have written down and include on your resume your best, strongest remote friendly skills and those experiences. Then you want to carry that to your application materials and online profiles. So we talked about updating your resume and cover letter for every job you apply for. You will always need to do that. But any online profiles that you have, particularly professional profiles that recruiters or hiring teams might be looking at, you want to make sure that those are updated with this experience as well. The networking component is one of the main things that you can do to really accelerate and experience forward momentum in your job search. So again, please don't be shy about your job searching. Share your goals, your ideas, where you want to be with your network, particularly your personal network and those that you've worked with before. And then begin applying for remote and flexible jobs. So these are the things that you can do and put into actionable steps right away. All right, so before we wrap it up, we have come to the time where we are about to start our questions. Please know, as a reminder, a recording and link to the recording and the resources that we've talked about will be emailed to you within a few days. For any other questions that you have, please go ahead and start putting those questions into the Q&A. But if you have or need other resources, make sure you check out the FlexJobs blog. We can go to the Q&A section right now, portion of the presentation. So put those in the Q&A section of Big Marker, and we will be over there to answer your questions.
Hello, everyone. My name's Anne. I'm a career coach here at FlexJobs, and I'll be answering your questions for the next few minutes. Could someone please put in the chat that you can hear me, if you can hear me? So that I know that you are hearing me. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I am going to go into the Q&A and start answering questions there. Again, if you want to upvote questions, I will kind of prioritize those. So here we go. So we asked, I need to use some experience that's more than 15 years old. How do I do that? So that's a good one, because recruiters do tell us that they are most interested in the last 10 to 15 years of experience, because that shows what you're most fresh at and what you're currently doing. But I do understand that sometimes what you did 15 years ago might be the only place that something that's very relevant, maybe relevancy in an industry or a function is. And so the way that we would typically recommend we do that so that we, aren't setting ourselves up for ageism is either just to mention it in the summary that you have experience in that way or in your cover letter. Or if you look at our resume samples, which will be one of the resources that you get emailed out after this and is here in the handout section, we often will put an other experience or additional experience section towards the bottom that will is very similar to how it would be in your regular experience, but we just keep the dates out. And then that's where you can highlight that experience, again, without, putting very old experience, at least not putting that year on there, to show that you do have that type of experience. And then keep in mind that you can always, like I said, mention it in your cover letter and talk about it in an interview. All right. Are we able to create multiple resume profiles on FlexJobs? Yes. If you go in, you will see the option to just create a new resume profile. This is a good thing to do if you're looking at a couple different zones, like maybe one is marketing, another is creative writing, or a couple things that are kind of different from each other. That way you'll have two different profiles. If a recruiter is looking in FlexJobs for one or the other of those, they're more likely to find you. And then also those resume profiles kind of tell the AI of the system what new jobs of interest to refer to you. And so it's good to do it in that way. We have another question about how do we know if, or go about asking if a remote position is going to pay for the office equipment. And this is a good question. I feel like in a lot of job descriptions, it will mention that. It will say that's one of the perks or the benefits. And so definitely look there. You can also go to their careers website under benefits and see if it mentions that that they give you reimbursement or they do pay for the office equipment. If that is not true, then I would say maybe at the second interview, you could ask, if you don't want to act like you want them to give you the computer, you can ask if there's any recommended technology. And at that point, they would generally say, we give you a stipend, or we will provide you with the equipment in that case. You can also, pick the brain of somebody who works there, if you know anybody who works at the company, to see if that's customary. All right. I actually was asking my colleagues about the one about filtering for certain US time zones. I did not find that answer, that there is a way, at least not on FlexJobs. But I feel like most employers are pretty flexible about that. They may say that they need you to be available at a certain time zone. But I think if it says, that it's available to anyone in the US, they'll probably be open to that. An alternative is just to keep looking by the different states that might be in certain time zones. But again, you need to be, if it's a New York-based job and you're not in New York, you may not be eligible for that job. I put into my cover letters to companies that I've reached out to that I can also work in a freelance capacity. Do you find that's something companies would consider, even if it's not advertised in the job post? I don't know if that's something they would consider, and I don't know that I would use the cover letter to include that. I would be more likely to apply to the job, and then if they are interested in you as a freelancer, let them broach that subject, because you want to look like you're serious about that job that they're recruiting you for. And if it says that it's full-time, then they're probably looking for someone full-time. And if they have freelance opportunities available, they will be listed as such. So I'm not sure that I would use my cover letter for that. All right, I think I have time for one more. I'm going to answer. Okay, so do you have any specifics on what type of jobs are available or growing in health and medical? There was another one about IT. I don't know the specifics of those, but a good way to see that is on our FlexJobs, where you can go in and research companies. If you go to your dashboard and then across the top it says find jobs and then research companies, it shows you or find jobs. It shows you all job categories, and you can find the medical or the IT and see the jobs that are posted there and start to get an idea of what is most popular, how many are listed for different types of jobs, and kind of make that your target. You also could, just Google it or look on FlexJobs. A lot of our articles, and if you get our newsletter weekly, it talks about, hot jobs, hot remote jobs in this industry or that industry. So I think those are good ways to kind of get a feel for what is most popular and trending in remote work. And then don't forget about the category drop down in the advanced search on FlexJobs, job search, to focus in on those specific industries. But thank you all so much for joining us today. A link to today's webinar and a list of the resources we shared will be emailed to you within a week. And if you'd like more support, we do offer one-on-one career coaching and support services from our career coaching team. And every Wednesday, we have a career coach Q&A for members only. Thanks again for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.